The railways of 19th-century Britain were local and regional in origin and character, and accordingly made use of local and regional heraldic symbolism, most commonly the arms of the towns and cities they served. In heraldic terms, the resulting emblems were unauthorized. Only one 19th-century railway company, the Great Central, went through the proper channels and obtained a grant of arms from the College of Arms, the official heraldic authority for England and Wales. The coat of arms of the Great Central Railway, granted in 1898, thus represents the best efforts of the professional heralds to produce an armorial device suitable for a modern railway company. The arms consist of a shield with a crest above it and a motto on a scroll below. The crest of a locomotive seen from the front and flanked by golden wings is a dramatic expression of the concept of railway speed, while the motto, Forward, conveys both the idea of movement and the progressive business philosophy of the company. The Great Central had begun in 1847 as the Manchester, Sheffield and Lincolnshire Railway, and adopted its new name in 1897, when the construction of its London extension transformed it from a regional network to a major mainline railway of national significance. The emblems of the Manchester, Sheffield and Lincolnshire Railway were in the traditional pattern, bringing together the shields of the major towns and cities the railway connected. The new arms of the Great Central Railway also incorporated relevant civic heraldry, but in an allusive rather than a direct way. Thus, the upper three portions of the shield use elements from the arms of Manchester, Sheffield and Lincoln, while the lower portion displays a cross, dragon's wings and red upright swords in reference to the arms of the City of London. At the centre of the cross is an object which was sometimes referred to informally as a flying bowler hat, but was, in fact, a cap of Mercury. Mercury was the Roman god of communication, of travellers, and of the rapid carrying of messages, and so was a very appropriate symbolic figure for a railway company. This coat of arms was proudly displayed throughout the Great Central system, and was highly visible on those ambassadors of any railway company, the locomotives and rolling stock. Here the arms can be seen decorating the splasher and tender of a Great Central locomotive being cleaned by women railway workers during the First World War. The arms were favourably viewed by the Railway magazine, which congratulated the railway on the design and particularly praised the inclusion of a modern Great Central locomotive as the crest, showing the great advance in the science of locomotive construction. The genealogical magazine devoted a 3-page article to the new arms, finding it especially laudable that a railway company has at last been found which has possessed a sufficient sense of rectitude to lawfully obtain arms of its own, and praising the Great Central for not following the terrible examples of other railways with their bogus and illegitimate heraldry, all praise to the Great Central for not having copied the errors of their predecessors. The Great Central was unique among 19th-century railway companies in obtaining a full and official grant of arms. Among other railways, the adoption of arms with no reference to anyone else and without any proper process remained standard practice. The Highland Railway, the northernmost railway system in the British Isles, was created by amalgamation in 1865. Its origins lay in the ambitions of a group of promoters in Inverness to create a gateway from the Highlands to the south via Perth, and in its emblem it accordingly brought together the arms of the cities of Inverness and Perth. The arms of both these cities are of great antiquity and have a strongly religious character, lending the Highland Railway a sense of high moral purpose, as if you might expect a blessing from the guard's van or a sermon from the footplate. A Scottish golden eagle acts as the single supporter for the two shields, embodying the spirit of the Highlands and expressing the corporate pride of the railway. This emblem can be seen in particularly noble form on the Highland Railway War Memorial in Station Square at Inverness. One of the major constituent railways of the Highland Railway was the Inverness and Aberdeen Junction Railway, which displayed this coat of arms on a viaduct which it built to cross the River Spey. This is not, however, the company's coat of arms. It is, in fact, the coat of arms of Earl Fife. The holders of this title were important local landowners who were supportive of the line. In former ages, a church or college might have honoured an aristocratic patron by embellishing its buildings with his or her coat of arms, and, in the 19th century, the railways did the same. The North British Railway's device is visually similar to the Highlands, and follows the same pattern, combining the two shields of two important cities on its network, the Scottish capital, Edinburgh, the focus of its operations, and the border town of Berwick-upon-Tweed, where its rails met those of the English North Eastern Railway to complete the East Coast Main Line, uniting England and Scotland. This Anglo-Scottish connection is also symbolised by the background of English roses and Scottish thistles, against which the shields are displayed. The version of the Edinburgh arms is idiosyncratic in that it incorporates the supporters, who normally stand on either side of the shield, into the design of the shield itself, by placing them either side of the triple-towered castle, which is the primary symbol of the city. The artists who created the versions of arms which the railways used often took liberties in this way. And, talking of Scottish arms and taking liberties, we will be discussing the emblem of the Caledonian Railway a little later. Railways in Ireland, like their English and Scottish counterparts, looked primarily to relevant civic arms for their emblems. These three companies, the Great Southern and Western, the Dublin, Wicklow and Wexford, and the Midland Great Western, all had a presence in Dublin, and all reference the city's arms in their devices, along with the other towns and cities their networks served, with idiosyncratic additions and alterations of their own. The Belfast and Northern Counties Railway took the straightforward course of using the arms of Belfast itself, complete with seahorse crest, seahorse and wolf supporters, and biblical motto. The railway used several different versions of this device, with changes in detail and in some of the colours. Here, for example, the bell, which in Belfast's arms is white on a red background, is shown as blue on a white background. But, as mentioned earlier, such variations in the arms the railways used were not uncommon. Civic heraldry could be combined with other elements to reinforce a railway's identity and character. The Rhymney Railway in South Wales, which connected collieries and ironworks in the eastern valleys to the docks at Cardiff, displayed a red shield with 3 chevrons, which is a version of the arms borne by the city of Cardiff before it obtained a formal grant of arms in 1907. Alongside, displaying a chevron reversed, is the shield of Newport, Monmouthshire, a town which the Rhymney Railway aimed to serve, but never in the end reached over its own rails. Above is a landscape in miniature, which amounts to a visual summary of the economic basis of the railway. It shows an iron furnace from the 1820s and a 3-masted sailing ship. The furnace is a reference to the Rhymney ironworks, where the line began, while the ship represents the port of Cardiff, where it terminated. However, for Welsh railways, national symbols tended to be as important as local ones, and sometimes more important. Regionalism and localism play an essential part in railway heraldry, but national and royal symbolism also play a vital role. The railway's habit of appropriating arms belonging to others for their own emblems extended even to royal heraldry. Earlier we discussed the Great Northern Railway getting into trouble with the City of London over its use of the city's full coat of arms in its own very elaborate heraldic device. In response to the criticism, the Great Northern simplified the design and removed the unauthorized arms of London, but continued to use the equally unauthorized royal arms of England and Scotland. The badge used on the East Coast joint stock, the carriages jointly run by the Great Northern, North Eastern and North British Railways on the East Coast Main Line, similarly made free with the royal arms, adding to them a condensed version of the arms of Edinburgh and the familiar arms of the City of London. The emblem of the West Coast joint stock, the similar arrangement between the London and North Western Railway and the Caledonian Railway on the West Coast Main Line, took a different approach, using a lion coloured according to the English arms, gold on red, but posed according to the Scottish arms, rampant, thus alluding to the two sets of royal arms, but avoiding any direct copying of them. Perhaps the most dramatic example of a railway company taking liberties with royal heraldry is the Caledonian Railway itself. The Caledonian was a grand and opulent company, and, it is fair to say, considered itself the national railway of Scotland. Hence it took the nation's name, in the Roman form of Caledonia, for itself, and, naturally enough, took the nation's insignia as well, in the form of the royal arms of Scotland, complete and unabridged. Here, for comparison, are the Scottish royal arms as displayed in the city chambers in Edinburgh. Every element shown here is carried directly over to the Caledonian's version. The shield, with its lion rampant, the crowned and collared unicorn supporters, the helm and lion crest, the medal of the Order of the Thistle, and the two mottos. The only change is the addition of a third scroll, bearing the name of the company. The implication was that Caledonian Railway coaches embellished with this regal armorial device were, like warships or embassies, detached pieces of national territory. Once you had set foot in them, you were on Scottish soil. In 1873, boarding a train for Scotland at Euston, Sir John Anson, an English baronet, pointed to the Scottish arms which adorned his Caledonian Railway saloon, and joked to his companions that they were halfway to Scotland already. As it happens, he never reached Scotland. The train crashed at Wigan, and he, along with 12 other passengers, was killed. It was not only the Caledonian which made free with the Scottish royal arms. The Great North of Scotland Railway adopted the Royal Red Lion of Scotland, combined with the three towers from the arms of the city of Aberdeen, and topped off by the Scottish royal crest of lion, crown, sword, and sceptre. The Great North of Scotland Railway, despite its grandiose name, was relatively small, but it did serve the royal residence at Balmoral, carrying Queen Victoria and other members of the royal family to and from their Highland retreat. Clearly the Queen took no offence at the royal pretensions of the railway's coat of arms, so presumably nobody else did either. Several railways in Wales used another royal emblem, the Prince of Wales badge of 3 feathers. This was used by the Taff Vale Railway, the Newport, Abergavenny and Hereford Railway, the Festiniog Railway, and the Cambrian Railways. The Cambrian, in particular, used this badge very extensively, not only on clocks, but on locomotives, passenger and goods rolling stock, and on buildings, staff uniforms, and publications. The Taff Vale later replaced this badge with a more elaborate emblem, which used not a royal symbol, but a national one, the red dragon. The Taff Vale's dragon is in the heraldic attitude known as displayed, with wings outstretched, and carries on his breast the arms of the ancient kingdom of Gwynedd, as borne by Llewellyn the Great in the 13th century, a strongly nationalistic design, and a conscious evocation of the Welsh medieval past. The Barry Railway Company was, like the Taff Vale, a South Wales system, and also adopted the red dragon as its emblem, this time in the passant attitude we see in the Welsh national flag. The dragon dominates this device, keeping rather uneasy company with the aristocratic stag in the crest above him. The stag is from the arms of the Windsor-Clive family, major landowners in southeastern Wales. Robert Windsor-Clive, 1st Earl of Plymouth, was the long-serving chairman of the Barry Railway Company, another example of the heraldic touching of the forelock to aristocratic patrons, which was not uncommon in the emblems of Victorian railway companies. The Cambrian Railways also made use of the dragon. The Cambrian network served both Wales and England, and in honour of this cross-border status they combined the Welsh dragon with the English rose in their emblem, although for some reason the Cambrian dragon is shown as green rather than red. This device was used alongside the Prince of Wales feathers on Cambrian rolling stock and locomotives. In this example, the dragon and rose device is on the splasher and the feathers on the tender. Heraldry is of medieval origin, and the heraldic emblems of the railway age represent a fascinating intersection of the medieval and the modern. The device used by the Cambrian Railways is a particularly notable example of this. According to C. P. Gascoigne's The Story of the Cambrian, published in 1922, just before the company was absorbed into the Great Western Railway, the original design for the emblem was made and presented to the directors many years ago by the late Mr. W. W. E. Wynne of Pennyarth, Towyn, a noted antiquarian of his day. William Watkin Edward Wynne, to give him his full name, was, among other things, a historian of medieval Wales, and the emblem he designed is distinctly medieval in style. A Gothic trefoil provides the background to the shield itself, and is decorated with a fur from medieval heraldry known as pien, gold tails on a black background. The dragon and the rose are shown with one half from each joined to the other. This practice, known as dimidiation, was a way of combining two coats of arms, and in using it to express the union of the railway's Welsh and English interests, Wynne was drawing on the practices of very early heraldry, forging a connection between modern railway operation and the distant chivalric past. Medievalism was evoked in railway heraldry in a range of ways. Lettering often played an important role, with the company name being displayed on a scroll or an encircling garter. In the cases of the Midland, Metropolitan and Caledonian Railways, the name of the company is on a scroll positioned more or less where the motto would be in a conventional coat of arms, while the Southeastern, Highland and Great Eastern Railways provide examples of the garter form. Both design choices consciously reflected medieval precedent. The medieval model for the garter can be found in items such as this English funerary badge, probably produced to mark the death of the Black Prince in 1376. The similarity with emblems such as those of the London, Chatham and Dover Railway and the North Staffordshire Railway is clear. In these two cases, too, the lettering is medieval in style. It harmonizes visually with the heraldry and reinforces the atmosphere of medievalism. A particularly striking instance of railway medievalism in a company emblem is provided by the Furness Railway, a small railway which operated in northwestern England. The main line of this railway ran past the site of Furness Abbey, founded in 1123, and the company adopted the seal of the abbey as its symbol, with the Virgin and Child flanked by monks holding up shields of the Kingdom of England and the Duchy of Lancaster. The only changes are that the name of the railway runs around the upper part of the roundel, and the motto of the Cavendish family, Cavendo Tutus, around the lower part. The Cavendishes, the family of the Dukes of Devonshire, were great landowners in the area and major supporters of the railway, another example of aristocratic patronage acknowledged through heraldry. The heraldic practices of the railways did attract a certain amount of criticism. Arthur Charles Fox Davis, an influential late 19th century writer on heraldry, took aim at the Great Western in his book The Art of Heraldry, published in 1904. While discussing the representation of marriage in heraldry by placing the family arms of husband and wife next to each other, he took the opportunity to criticize what he called the peculiarly startling practice of the Great Western Railway Company, who similarly on their coaches ally the arms of the cities of London and Bristol. The ribbons of steel laid down by the company between these two cities may be bonds akin to fetters matrimonial, but the laws of heraldry give no sanction to and take no cognizance of such a conjunction. That the Great Western Railway Company have nothing to do with the arms of London or of Bristol, and, were that possible, rather less with the robe of estate upon which the shields are carried, is, by the way, one of the little peculiarities of so much of the impersonal armoury of the present day. Fox Davis criticised the Great Western and other companies, but approved, of course, of the Great Central, which had obtained a proper grant of arms. He was the editor of the Genealogical Magazine, and was almost certainly the writer of the article quoted earlier, praising the Great Central for its excellent example. It should be pointed out that Fox Davis held particularly rigid views about the unauthorized use of arms, frequently attacking those who used bogus arms, or arms which were not their own. He even wrote a polemical book about the right to bear arms, so polemical that he published it under the pseudonym X. The Great Western itself never changed the fundamentals of its heraldic device, but did, over time, change the way in which it was depicted. An article in the Great Western magazine in 1930 criticised the older version of the arms with the robe of estate as an incorrect rendering, which showed heraldic devices to which the company is not entitled, cheerfully disregarding the fact that the company was not entitled to use the arms of London or Bristol either. However, the Great Northern's run-in with the City of London, and Fox Davis's grumbles about the Great Western notwithstanding, it seems that there were very few complaints ever made about the magpie habits of railway companies when it came to heraldry. Against a background of Victorian commercial culture in which the very popularity of heraldry made its usage something of a free-for-all, the eclectic and informal heraldry of the rails was simply an accepted part of everyday life. It should also be said that many of the arms which railway companies borrowed had not themselves ever been formally granted to their supposed owners. Belfast is just one example of the many towns and cities which had, at the time the railways began using their arms, no formally recognised right to bear those arms themselves. Derby is another example, Birmingham yet another. Even the arms of the City of London, while they had been in use since the 14th century, were not formally confirmed by grant until 1957, over 100 years after so many railway companies had so freely made use of them. In 1923, almost all the railway companies then operating in Britain, which had been inherited from the 19th century, ceased to exist as independent entities. They were gathered into 4 large, regionally organised railway groupings. The Great Western alone continued, transformed into one of these new groupings, but the other 3 were new creations: the Southern Railway, the London, Midland and Scottish Railway, or LMS, and the London and North Eastern Railway, or LNER. As for heraldry, the Great Western carried on using the Bristol-London device it had always used, thus, no doubt, continuing to annoy Mr. Fox Davis. The London, Midland and Scottish combined a rose for England, a thistle for Scotland, and the dragon's wing crest of the City of London into a symbol in the form of a heraldic roundel. The London North Eastern applied for an official grant of arms in 1924, following the tradition of the Great Central, one of its constituent companies. A beautiful coat of arms was duly granted, which the LNER barely used. The Southern Railway managed without any armorial device until 1938, when it too applied for a grant of arms. The Second World War delayed matters, and the grant was not finally made until 1946, 1 year before the Southern disappeared into British Railways, part of the nationalised British transport system, which, like all the new state industries, had its own heraldic identity.